Hello and welcome to another video. If you stumbled upon this one, it means you're starting to watch F1 or want more info on every team on the grid, and that's what I'm here for. In this video, we're going to take a brief look at every team and their most recent successes and failures to paint a picture of what's going on in the grid. Funded by Frank Williams, Williams Racing is one of what could be considered historic teams that have been racing for a long time. The team started off a reused chassis from another team called March in 1977 and won their first Formula One race in the 1979 British Grand Prix at the hands of the Swiss driver Clay Regazzoni. They would go on to live their most successful patch from 1980 up until the late 90s, winning 9 championships in that time in the hands of numerous F1 legends. From then on, they stayed strong, being regular championship contenders up until 2005, when they started sliding down the field. Ever since, they only scored a single one-off win at the 2012 Spanish Grand Prix at the hands of Pastor Maldonado in what was a fairy tale weekend. At the start of the 2014 hybrid era, they struck an engine deal with Mercedes that would prove to be one of the best decisions in the short term. That engine, being so far superior to its competitors at the time, meant that they were regular podium contenders, finishing third in the Constructors' Championship only behind Mercedes and Red Bull for the 2014 and 2015 seasons. After that though, the other engines started catching up, especially the Ferrari one, and their low budget meant that the bad decisions in the development of the car would be shown greatly on track, leading to them sliding down the championship ranks again through the years, finishing 5th in 2016 and 17, and falling all the way back down to last in the past 2 seasons, leaving a hard impression that the team's glory days are far from coming back. But there's a glimmer of hope still. With the 2020 campaign, they're much closer to the pack, being able to fight regularly with Haas and Alfa Romeo, and after a cash injections due to the Williams family selling the team to an investment firm will for sure ensure future stability on their way back to the top. Haas is the newest team on the grid, the new kid on the block, let's say. Joining in 2016, they are the first US-based teams in Haas Lola, not the same Haas by the way, who took part in the 1985 and 1986 seasons. Haas is the only team that doesn't build their own chassis, that being provided by Italian manufacturers Dallara, and the engines being bought from Ferrari, as well as many aerodynamic components and parts. The team had a stable team structure with Roman Grosjean being there since the beginning of the team's history and Kevin Magnussen joining the following year. 2016 was a mediocre season for the team, scoring points very occasionally, while 2017 showed better form, still finishing 8th in the championship but with promise of more to come in the future. 2018 was definitely the highlight year, fighting for 4th position with giant automaker Renault's F1 team and coming just short. But all those steps forward in the 2018 season seemed to disappear from 2019 on. With a rogue aero package that couldn't be understood, they scored just 5 races, leaving them second to last in what was a chaotic 2019 for the American team. 2020 didn't get any better though. With the struggling Ferrari engine, the chassis was better, but nonetheless they're hoping for a resurgence after the budget cap is introduced for the 2022 season. Alfa Romeo might seem like a newcomer, not being named much before these past few seasons, but that's just because of a rename. Formerly known as Sauber, this team has been a propeller team, catching and racing future talents for the big teams to snatch up. With familiar names like Kimi Raikkonen, Felipe Massa, Charles Leclerc, among others, they started operations in 1993, staying in the middle to low part of the grid up until their partnership with engine manufacturer BMW in 2006, which led to a buyout of the Sauber team in 2008. They were championship contenders that season, showing multiple podiums and even a race win, until BMW took the bad decision of halting development of the 2008 car to focus on the changing regulations of 2009 in the midst of the championship battle, leading to the star driver Robert Kubica finishing 4th in that season. But the next year didn't pan out, falling back on the development of the competitive car, leading to a 6th place and 2 podiums in the whole season. At the end of 2009, BMW opted to leave the world of F1, reselling the team back to Peter Sauber, leading to a new engine deal with Ferrari that looked promising at first with a couple podiums, but then the team ended up falling back due to costly development and a struggle to find sponsors, which led to the decision to hire paid drivers. Essentially, drivers that are there not solely on merit, but because of a big wallet and good contacts. Even that wasn't enough though, leaving them to finish last on the 2017 season, with a managing team reshuffle and technical lead being given to Frederic Vasseur. This reshuffle ended up being highly positive for the team, leading to their upturn in form on the recent seasons, ending up with a healthy amount of points and a few championship positions up on what they had become to, before sliding back down with similar issues to Haas and Ferrari on the power unit department. The soon-to-be renamed Aston Martin team, Racing Point is an evolution of the Force India team that had raced from 2008 to 2018. This team endured tons of name changes and evolutions over the years. Let's do a quick recap. The team was formed in late 2007 when a consortium led by businessman BJ Malia bought the failed Spiker F1 team. After a few years of being relegated to backmarkers, they scored their first championship points and maiden podium at the 2009 Belgian Grand Prix, to what would be the only standout of a few mediocre seasons, scoring occasional points up until 2014. Force India was another team that was favored by the changing regulations for the 2014 season, finishing in the podium at least once every year up until 2019. But it was a smooth sailing for the UK-based team. With a complicated financial situation, they had to regularly ask the FIA for the prize money early to start developing the next year's car, and finishing where they would, taking Williams' place in fourth in the Constructors' Championship. Ever since that team started their downfall, made them a true example of how to get the maximum out of every penny available. But then things got worse. With the economical complications and pending prosecution of the team owner Vijay Mallya, they started seizing and freezing his assets, leaving the team with an even more reduced budget by mid-2018. The team could no more. After being pushed into administration, Force India was bought by billionaire and father of one of the F1 drivers, Lawrence Stroll, and his consortium, leading to what we know now as the Racing Point Formula One team, who had a struggling 2019 season, in part due to the problems in the previous year halting development of the car, but then came back strong, pushing the likes of McLaren and Renault for 2020 in a controversial interpretation of the rulebook, making what was called the Pink Mercedes due to the car's extremely close resemblance of the 2019 championship winning car. With four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel joining the team in 2021 and the rebranding as Aston Martin, will surely grant a solid base for the team to grow and expand on their hopes of one day becoming champions. Scuderia Alfa Tauri is the rebranding of the team Toro Rosso, Red Bull's junior team. They're an Italian team that was bought from backmarkers Minardi at the end of 2006. Similar to Alfa Romeo, they're a propeller team, although mostly for drivers from the Red Bull Junior program. They make the drivers used to the car, to the championship, and then, only if they perform adequately, they get promoted to a big team after a few good seasons. Results from the team were mediocre at best on the first two seasons, until the 2008 Italian Grand Prix, where a soaked Monza gave the home team the miracle of winning their first of two races, both at their home circuit, first one being at the hands of now four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel. From their first win on, results stayed stagnant, finishing year after year around the back of the pack, with drivers switching mid-season on what seemed like every season. That was until 2019, where they saw an upturn in performance, and with a healthy dose of luck, they would manage to score two podiums in two chaotic races that season. A third place by Daniel Kvyat at the German Grand Prix, and a second place at the Brazilian Grand Prix, at the hands of Pierre Gasly. Their second win came at another crazy race, where Gasly narrowly won to McLaren's Carlos Sainz. This 2020 has shaped up to be one of the best seasons in the team history, fighting for sixth in the Constructors' Championship against Ferrari, when their previous best result had been eighth. The Renault team we know now will be rebranded as Alpine from 2021 on. This will mean nothing but a name and livery change, since Alpine is a sub-brand of the Renault family. The team has passed through lots of name changes and iterations, but the Renault team we know today started in 1980, where a small team announced they would join the championship. That team was called Toleman. Tolman would go on to race for four seasons up until 1985, and in the meantime gave an initial seat to F1 racing legend Ayrton Senna, who started his career with the small British team. Clothing brand Benetton would go on to buy the team at the end of the season, running Benetton Formula from 1986 to 2001, getting two world titles in the process at the hands of Michael Schumacher in the 1994 and 95 seasons. Benetton would go on to sell the team to their engine manufacturers at the end of 2001, starting what was known as the Renault F1 team, who would give Fernando Alonso his two world titles in 2005 and 6, before a downturn in performance, and after lots of controversies, lawsuits and more, would go on to sell 75% of the team in shares in 2010, giving way for Lotus Renault Grand Prix from 2011 onwards. Lotus would make a competitive race-winning car with repeated podium appearances from the drivers and collecting a few wins from time to time, but the performance would fade eventually, leading to, in 2015, a 7th and 8th place in Japan, giving them their first double top 8 finish since the 2013 Indian Grand Prix. Needless to say, they weren't doing that well. By the end of 2015, Renault announced that they would be rebuying the team for 2016, leading to the Renault we know now. Renault would rise from a backmarker team in their first season to an impressive fourth in the championship by the end of 2018. And what was hoped to be a step forward to close the gap to the top three teams in 2019 didn't happen. Although they made a competitive car, McLaren would take their spot for best of the rest, leaving Renault to score a fifth place, the first time they stepped down since their comeback. 2020 would prove no more progress with a tight midfield and tons of competitive cars. They will bank on the change in regulations and returning Fernando Alonso to reignite their title hopes. If I said previously that Williams is one of the most historic teams, there is another one, a privateer that was usually at the top of the podium and is now recovering from their worst few seasons ever. McLaren was founded by Le Mans winner and racer all-around Bruce McLaren in 1966, and he would go on to race and win with his car up until his fatal accident. Teddy Mayer would take over the team and lead them to their first Formula One Constructors' Championship in 1974 with Emerson Fittipaldi, and James Hunt winning the Drivers' Championship in '76. In 1981, McLaren merged with Ron Dennis's Project 4 Racing, a very successful Formula 2 team. Dennis took over as team principal and shortly after organized a buyout of the original McLaren shareholders to take full control of the team. This began their most successful era, with Constructors' Championship in 1985, 88, 89, 90, 91, and 98, and additional Drivers' Championships in 84, 86, 98, 99, and 2008. They seemed unstoppable, always up there with the giants, up until their engine supplier Mercedes started their own team in 2010, and therefore they fell to customer status. This added to management issues led to the worst part of the team's history, the second partnership with Honda. Up until 2015, McLaren Honda was a historic and dominant name, reminiscent of the late 80s and early 90s domination of the couple, but now it's a big stain in both McLaren's and Honda's racing history. With an uncooperative and misleading partnership, they would go on to finish ninth in the championship, making it McLaren's worst season finish since 1980, and in 2016, things would get marginally better. By the end of that year, Ron Dennis would leave the team, being replaced by businessman and marketing expert Zach Brown, who'd go on to become the CEO by the end of 2018. The 2017 season promised big improvements from Honda's side with a redesign of the engine and from McLaren, who said they had the best chassis on the grid. Although it didn't happen that way, 2017 proved to be the breaking point of the McLaren-Honda partnership, with extremely poor reliability, lack of performance, and a ninth place in the championship with a total of 30 points. McLaren seek to find another engine supplier as soon as possible, but with Mercedes and Ferrari closing the door on them, it only led to Renault engines being available. At the beginning of the 2018 season, McLaren looked promising with a very good performance that consolidated the team as fourth or fifth best, but a car unresponsive to upgrades meant that the development had to be halted early, and by the end of the season, they had the second slowest car. For 2019, expectations were not high. A sixth place in the championship would have been enough, and the lackluster start to the season seemed like that would be the possible outcome. That was until the car came alive, performing amazingly and pulling in front of the midfield, leading to the team's best season since 2013, and with a surprise first podium in over 2,000 days, almost 6 years, at the Brazilian Grand Prix, and a first podium ever also for Carlos Sainz. 2020 built on that, with a podium at the season opener and in Monza. This would continue to be an upturn, looking close to finishing third in the standings. We'll have to see how the team continues to evolve on their fight back to the top. Red Bull Racing rose from the ashes of the underfunded and failed Jaguar team that was bought out for the 2005 season. In that single season, they scored more points than Jaguar had done in the previous two. By the end of '06, they had already scored their maiden podium at the Monaco Grand Prix. The team finished 7th in the championship with 16 points, 5 points ahead of the struggling Williams team. 2007 saw the debut of the RB3, Adrian Newey's first Red Bull car, fitted with a brand new Renault engine that gave way to another podium and an all-around good season for the team. The 2009 season was a turning point, fighting with Brawn for the world title up until the end promised an interesting 2010, which delivered. Red Bull won the 2010 title on the last race with Sebastian Vettel battling Fernando Alonso up until Brazil. 2011 would prove a dominant season, and in 2012 they would have the biggest challenge yet in the form of a Spaniard in the Ferrari, with a narrow bid to become champions again that season. That plus a no competition season in 2013 would make Red Bull champions of the V8 era. Then came 2014, with a change in the regulations. They would go to finish second behind Mercedes, and a resurgent Ferrari would demote them to third down the line. And that's how they stayed up until now, basically, with occasional wins throughout the years to finish third behind Mercedes and Ferrari. Red Bull were hopeful that 2019 would mark a stronger season due to a changing engine provider, but they ended the season with just one less win than 2018, although with less reliability issues, let's give them that, to finish third with 3 wins for Max Verstappen, who would go on to finish third himself in the Drivers' Championship. 2020 would see a better season in paper, finishing second but way behind Mercedes, closer to the midfield than the top. If we talk F1, we have to talk Ferrari. They have been part of the F1 Championship ever since the second ever race in Monaco in 1950. The team was founded by Enzo Ferrari, initially to race cars produced by Alfa Romeo, and is the oldest surviving and most successful Formula One team. As a constructor, Ferrari has recorded 16 Constructors' Championship, almost doubling the second most successful team, which was 9. The team's rich winning record started in 1951 at the Silverstone Grand Prix, at the hands of the Argentine José Froilán González, but they would have to wait a decade for their first Constructors' title, which came in 1961, in where they dominated, winning 5 out of the 8 races that season. Titles and championships would come in pairs of 2 throughout the decades, up until the 2000s, where at the hands of Schumacher they would go on to dominate the early part of the decade, getting a clean sweep from 2000 to 2004, winning 5 titles in a row until Fernando Alonso got Renault's maiden championship in 2005. Ferrari would continue to be a force to reckon with, always in contention for the championship, but with the last title now having been 12 years ago, fans are starting to become impatient, and so seem to be the drivers. 2019 was a roller coaster of a year for the Italian team, with new Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc in what was his only second season in F1 would take 6 pole positions, converting 2 of them into wins, one of them being at the home of the team at Monza for the first time since 2010. But it was too little too late, given that Mercedes was close to securing the championship by the Japanese Grand Prix with 4 races still left to go in the season, and with driver clashes and heated radio message, it was a hard season to be a Ferrari fan. But nobody could have foreseen what 2020 would bring. With a secret agreement regarding the power unit's legality, the team built a dog of a car, sliding down to 6th in the championship, scraping 4 points at the back of the midfield. 2021 won't be much different either, so don't expect to see a red uniform on the podium for at least another year. Alright, so we can't talk about recent years in F1 without mentioning Mercedes. Mercedes reigns initially in 1954 when they won 2 championships with legend Juan Manuel Fangio before they withdrew in 1955. They would remain absent as a constructor up until 2010 when they bought Braun Grand Prix and eventually evolving into the dominant machines we know today. They had a few under-the-radar years with a lineup consisting of Nico Rosberg and returning 7-time world champion Michael Schumacher. Their first pole position came at the 3rd race of the 2012 season at the hands of Nico Rosberg, who would go on to give Mercedes their first win at the 2013 Monaco Grand Prix, marking what we would become used to seeing from the next year onwards. 2013 also marked the year that Lewis Hamilton joined the team, replacing second time retiring Schumacher to what would be a pretty mediocre comeback, let's say, scoring just 1 pole positions and 1 podium in 3 seasons he raced. On to 2014 then, with a new set of regulations dictating a new V6 turbo hybrid power unit gave over prepared Mercedes a completely dominant season, getting their first double championship since 1955 and lighting a fire within the team, a fire of competition and complete segregation between the 2 parts of the garage, proving that 2 experienced, ambitious and talented number 1 drivers wasn't a good decision for the top team. If 2014 was shaking the water season, 2015 would be a storm, with both drivers challenging for the championship with all their might, playing every card available, pushing each other physically, mentally, and on the track. Lewis Hamilton would go on to edge out his teammate by the end of the season, and 2016 would prove to be too much for Nico Rosberg. This time he was fighting as hard as he could to win the 2016 title and leaving right after, not wanting to go through the stress of another season at the divided team. 2017 would see a new driver joining as Valtteri Bottas was promoted from Williams, where he had been excelling to drive a championship contender car. He would go on to win a few races, but he was no match for Hamilton, who took that season's title, followed by 2018 where he didn't have much competition. For 2019, we would see a better Bottas who challenged Hamilton throughout the season, but not enough, handing the Brit his 6th World Championship and the team's as well, and their machinery was unmatched for the 2020 season, inevitably banking another championship on what has become an unfortunately predictable outcome, showing a complete domination of the late 2010s by Mercedes. What will we see in 2022 with the biggest change in regulations in F1 history and the introduction of a budget cap? We can agree that the field will be much closer and at the top, with the likes of Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, Alpine, Aston Martin, and hopefully Ferrari all in contention for the title. Exciting times to come for sure, and a great time to start to be an F1 fan. So, this pretty much rounds up all the team introductions to F1. As you may have seen, I didn't go into much detail as to not overwhelm with data, but to provide enough to paint a picture of the grid. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to like it and subscribe so you never miss any future uploads.